Joining us now is Lee Murphy. Lee is a candidate for Congress. He's running for the Republican congressional nomination in Delaware. There's one congressman in Delaware. So one guy represents a whole state, two senators, one congressman. Lee, I met you at CPAC. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, John, and welcome to Wilmington.
I tell you what, I was here last night, and here we are in King Street in the legal district. I went for a walk after I set everything up and checked in. And Lee, it was like I was in a ghost town. There's no one outside. All the windows are boarded up. There's glass running around middle of the street, broken glass. There's police do not cross lines. It was like I was walking through Beirut.
Well, unfortunately, John, at this particular time in Wilmington, I have to say Wilmington after dark, normally after 5 o'clock in the evening, it kind of turns into a ghost town under normal circumstances. But with the unrest that we've had here in the last few days, it's even more of a ghost town. And people, quite frankly, are not coming downtown, and rightfully so. There's tension in the air and demonstrations throughout the city.
What is the level of lawlessness here in Wilmington as compared to some of the other areas, Lee?
I think over the weekend here in downtown Wilmington, we had a level of disturbance where there was looting, broken windows, businesses being boarded up, people being hurt. Fortunately, no one was killed. The disturbances spread throughout the city. Car windows were broken on a level for a city of this size. It was a major disturbance.
This level of lawlessness, when you're talking to business owners that are at risk of having their place of business, their property broken into, looted, destroyed, stolen, everything wiped out, and then burned to the ground, what's their reaction? Because obviously the mayor here and the governor don't feel it's that big of a deal, right?
Well, it is that big of a deal. I'll give you an example. There's a sporting goods store, Al's Sporting Goods Store on Market Street. It's been there since 1930. The windows were broken. The entire store was looted. This store has been in Wilmington through thick and thin, the good times and the bad times. This store supports local charities. This store employs local people within the limits of the city. Al's at this particular time is destroyed. There's not going to be any jobs. There's not going to be any charity to the local community. It's an institution. Whether they come back in Wilmington, that's probably questionable right now. So that's one example, and that pains me because I've been shopping there since I was a kid, and it is distressing.
Mm-hmm. The business owners that you're talking to that have been under this lockdown, so we've had a double whammy, right? Lee Murphy, number one, they can't open their stores, they can't do business because of we're under this lockdown scenario. But now I guess you can loot and you don't need a mask or you don't need social distancing. How does that jive, Lee?
Well, it's really, quite frankly, upsetting. I mean, I get up every day now with a real pain in my gut. I live here. I've lived here my entire adult life. Wilmington was a city on the brink of making its way back. There was a little light at the end of the tunnel as of last week, and now this just sets everything back. It sets everything way, way back. People are not going to come in from the suburbs to shop, to dine in the city. It's really a blow to the people that live in the community. Mm-hmm. When the press leaves, the TV leaves, the residents are going to be left here, and they're going to be left with very little.
Mm-hmm. Let's bring your assistant and come in here for just a sec. Sherry, you were talking about Richmond today from Wilmington. I was surprised that you knew that, being in Wilmington. So obviously it made the national news, and we're based in Richmond. Tell us what you heard.
I think it was the chief of police, very distinguished, serious man. Loves
in
his,
Richmond.
in Richmond. Loves his city. Was very composed through most of the press conference. He was telling a story about a fire truck trying to get through the crowd to reach a burning house. And the protesters blocked the fire truck. I believe, if I got this fact straight, the police came in, managed to get there, carved out a path for the fire truck to progress, and the protesters shut it down again. And there was a young girl in that burning building. I don't know the outcome. I'm going to check the news. We pray that she made it. But he lost his composure while telling this story, imploring people to not to work together, to get through this together, to not, he said, this isn't the Richmond I know and love. This isn't the Mid-Atlantic I know and love. This isn't the country that I know and love, because they're 99% of first responders are working, are part of the community, and they're working to help people, to make it a better community. They live there. And I think that they genuinely love everybody in the community, and it's heartbreaking that one or two, disturbed people that use very, very poor judgment and hurt other people have caused this. It needs to be, deeply explored and acknowledged, and I'll let Lee speak to the policy issues and how, someone in Congress would respond to that. It's a huge responsibility, and I personally want people like Lee Murphy to be in Congress, using his moral integrity and his compassion for all people to help lead us out of this.
Lee, I know you've been talking to a lot of people. Obviously, that's why we love to get candidates on, because to win, you have to talk to people. What is the general consensus now of the people that you're talking to on an individual basis? Or what do they think of this whole thing?
Peaceful protest. I mean, I grew up in the 1960s, and I participated in many a peaceful protest. In fact, back in 1968, when they had the riots throughout the country after Martin Luther King was shot and killed, there were riots right here in the city of Wilmington. And Wilmington is still trying to recover from those riots from 1968. Peaceful protest, I think most people do not have a problem with peaceful protest. What it's turned into now throughout the country is literal mayhem throughout the country, and a lack of leadership by the governors and the mayors of these cities, the total lack of command and leadership. But here in Delaware, I think people really are just, I think across America right now, I think there's no place for the looting and the rioting and the lawlessness that is taking place throughout the country. And it really has to stop. Who's causing this rioting right now? That's a good question. The peaceful protesters, we had a protester here Saturday night in Wilmington. He was walking up Market Street, protesting peacefully. The protest turned into violence, and he found himself protecting, actually, a Starbucks. He was between the Starbucks and the demonstration when it turned violent.
Mm-hmm.
That took some bravery.
No question about it. A lot of people have been texting me in, pushing back, because I don't think a lot of my listeners commenting that, this is some effort for a one world order or some bigger picture, and define it in history. I mean, I just think it's a bunch of thugs looting stores. I don't think when you get a U-Haul and an SUV and you pull up in front of a Macy's and you bash the store in, and you carry out the goods and throw it in your truck and drive away and then fence it over the river. I don't really think this is a movement for a one world order, Lee. I just think it's thugs taking advantage of this situation and Democratic governors and mayors that can't gain control of it. What say you?
They certainly, well, here in Delaware, we had a situation where we have a mayor, not a mayor, but a governor who has really, during the pandemic, not shown any leadership at all, and just followed the lead of his fellow governors in New Jersey and New York City. So this lack of leadership has continued now in the last week with the demonstrations here in Wilmington. Just to go back, a friend of mine lives only a few blocks from here, and the other night, Saturday night, he had a line of cars pull up in front of his house, all out-of-state license plates. Mm-hmm. Well, those people got out of their cars. They came back about an hour later, and their arms were filled with boxes and boxes of sneakers. They loaded their cars, and they took off for I-95 and left the city. So, I mean, we use the term thugs, we use the term bad guys, we use the term criminals. These people that are looting and breaking into stores and burning stores are bad people. Mm-hmm. Let's just call it for what it is. Mm-hmm. And they make a mockery out of the whole the whole peaceful demonstration and about the issues that we really should be addressing after the death of Floyd in Minnesota.
You're running for Congress in a very blue state. You're not a race that anybody is taking seriously. How do you turn this into a competitive race? Especially with Joe Biden at the top of the ticket, where you know he's going to carry Delaware by 2025.
Well, John, that's interesting because we have a presidential primary coming up on July 7th.
Right.
And the Republicans in this state are banding together to get Trump more votes than Joe Biden in this state. And it is doable. It is doable. So our goal right here from the...
Is it a real election or is it a mail-in ballot?
It's going to be a combination of open polling places. The governor has limited the number of open polling places. There will be some mail-in ballots.
Because the governor's afraid of the spread of the virus.
Well, that's, yeah.
But they're not afraid of the spread of the virus when thousands of people are demonstrating in the middle of Wilmington without masks on. That's okay. So looting stores and disrupting things, that's okay, but then you can't vote.
Well, apparently, that's the way the governor feels. And,
unbelievable.
Yeah. But going back to Delaware here and my race for Congress, we've been campaigning since last June. We announced a year ago. And we've targeted certain groups, the farmers, the 2A people, law enforcement, volunteer firemen, the churches up and down the state. And people that belong to these organizations really cut across party lines. They're Democrats, they're independents, they're Republicans. And these groups like what we have to say. And they're looking for a change. One-party rule here in Delaware has been in existence for 25 years. And people are looking for a change in this state. And the Joe Biden factor, quite frankly, Joe Biden is not the Joe Biden of old. And he has no message. And many of my Democratic friends here in this state.
Well, he's holed up in the basement.
Not that far from here. He came out yesterday. There was a Joe Biden sighting yesterday.
It's like a combination of Weekend at Bernie's and Tales from the Crypt. I mean, it's kind of a bizarre situation he's got going on.
I think people feel that most of the people I talk to here in Delaware, they knew Joe Biden 30 years ago, and they see what he is right now. And it's a pretty sad state of affairs.
Fastball, no question about it.
Yeah, I don't think he really ever had a fastball, but maybe a curveball. But
he lost that.
I've known Joe Biden a long time.
Lost the changeup too. He lost the changeup.
Yeah, I mean, I've known Joe, and Sherry's known Joe. We've known him. Delaware's a small state. We know the politicians. We know our elected officials, and no, he's lost it.
The fact that it's a small state and everybody knows everybody, that's another reason Lee is making this a competitive race.
Really?
People know him up and down the state, and
they know he's done.
And they know Lee up and down the state as well, and they know that he's the real deal. They like what they see.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're live at the DoubleTree Hotel by Hilton here in Wilmington, Delaware, just a couple miles from Joe Biden's basement, where Tales from the Crypt meets Weekends at Bernie's. We did see a sighting of him yesterday. He emerged from his basement. You know what they should do is just replace him with his wife. I mean, she's a formidable candidate. Joe Biden would be a much better candidate. I shouldn't even give him that suggestion, right? Like when he goes on the videos, like he's afraid to be there now without his wife, right? Because she'll
pull him off by the elbow,
kick him under the table or something like
actually
couples do sometimes.
We actually saw Joe on May 25th at a ceremony, and it was Jill and Joe, and they were unannounced on Memorial Day. I was shocked at how physically frail he was.
Really?
Physically frail.
Really?
Jill was by his side holding his elbow, and he walked gingerly up to the memorial, stayed about a minute, and then walked back and kept all the veterans all corralled off in a parking lot off to the side. They weren't allowed to honor the deceased while Joe was there.
Okay, well, that's on the ground reporting from Sherry, right there. John Fredericks Radio Network.